Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight or this afternoon, depending on where you're located in Canada. I have a really exciting talk for you tonight. I'll do my best to keep it to 30 minutes. I can talk about exercise for far longer than that. As Ruth said, I am the National Manager of Research Programs and Communications at JDRF Canada. I'm also, more importantly, perhaps, with type 1 diabetes, so I know the ins and outs. I've lived with type 1 for about 30 years, a little bit over 30 years already. I'm also a big advocate of healthy, active living and participation in sport. I'm an athlete myself. I've run races from 5 kilometers to marathons. I've done a number of triathlons where you swim, you bike, and you run. I've even been crazy enough to do an Ironman triathlon where you basically swim, bike, and run for the entire day. So I know how hard it can be to incorporate exercise, especially if you're newly diagnosed. And so I hope tonight what I can do is give you some information and equip you with the tools that you can use to have more confidence to partake in exercise activities that you like or that your child likes if your child has. Please feel free. I know we're a big group. Please feel free to type in messages or questions in the chat if you don't want to forget them. And like Ruth said, we'll leave time at the end to actually answer questions if you want to come on camera or go off mute. So what am I going to talk about today? I think, first off, just a little bit of background about why exercise is important, specifically for T1Ds. I'm going to share the clinical practice guidelines. It's always nice to have a sense of what is actually recommended for us when it comes to physical activity. I'm then going to touch on the complexity of T1D, which I'm sure many of you are already aware of. There are many, many factors which affect our blood sugars while we are working out. Then I'll switch to different considerations and different ways to think about developing strategies for you or for your child. I'll start off with blood sugar considerations. I'll talk a little bit about how different types of exercise can actually influence your blood sugars. I'll talk about ways to switch up your insulin regime when you're exercising, what you should keep in mind when it comes to nutrition. I find that often people with type 1 focus so much on their blood sugar management and on their insulin that they often forget about the nutrition side. And we know that nutrition and energy is incredibly important when it comes to not only having the energy to work out, right? But also making sure that you're performing at your best. So getting in those nutrients is really, really important. And then I'll close off with just a couple of examples if you want to get involved in some active events with JDRF, and then we'll open it up to questions. So first off, why should you exercise? I think the main point that we really want to drive home tonight is that anybody with T1D can exercise safely. You do sometimes hear of stories where people are told, oh, if you're a competitive athlete now that you have T1D, you might not be able to reach that same level, but we know that's not the case. You definitely can exercise safely and reach those goals of yours. Secondly, I think it's important to mention that, there's so much research about how exercise is beneficial for our overall health. For people with T1D, it's really great for helping control blood sugars, right? It actually makes you more sensitive to insulin. So you may have noticed already if your child is quite active, they need less insulin that day because the insulin actually works better. It helps you maintain your cardiovascular health, right? So making sure that your heart is healthy. And exercise also has been shown to reduce the risk of complications, which is something that is always, maybe not top of mind, but something that we think about if you've lived with T1D for a long time and perhaps have had some challenges with your blood sugar management. The third point here, I think, is worthwhile to share because we don't want to forget about it, right? Exercise should be fun, and exercise can improve your mental health or your child's mental health. And so if you're running into challenges, whether it's, going low all the time or having high blood sugars after really kind of high intense exercise, we don't want you to stop working out because we know how important it is for your quality of life. And then the last point, I made it nice, bolded it in JDRF blue, is really this idea that although it can be challenging and although it will, necessitate different changes to your day-to-day regime. Diabetes in and of itself should never hold you back from your fitness goals. And I think your path will just probably look a little bit different than someone who doesn't have type 1, but you can definitely still reach those goals. Just a little side note that the information that I'm providing tonight is really for your general knowledge. It's not medical advice. And of course, if you're thinking of changing your exercise regime and wanting to change, let's say, your insulin strategies, we definitely recommend that you chat with your healthcare team. So what do they actually recommend when it comes to clinical practice guidelines? So I'd love for you to think about, a standard week for yourself or for your child, whoever is, living with T1D. Think about how many minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic activity. So this is where you're huffing and puffing a little bit, you're sweating a little bit. Do you do a week, right? So the recommendation, this is from Diabetes Canada, and it's similar to the recommendation. It's actually the same recommendation that people without T1D have, is to complete 150 minutes throughout the week. And so, you might see this number and think, that's kind of high, right? Everybody's busy with work and life. How do I actually fit in 150 minutes? Small bouts of activity count, right? So even if you do 10 or 15 minutes of activity, it all adds up. So what we usually say is see where you're at right now, try and get to the 150, but be realistic about it, right? If right now you're doing one 30-minute run a week, perhaps you can bump it up to 1 hour the next week, and so on. Ideally, for T1D blood sugar control, for the benefit, you don't want to have more than 2 days without any sort of physical activity. Okay, so T1D complexity. So I put this graph in here on the left on purpose, and when you listen to presentations, often when you can't see something, it's frustrating. But that's the point here, right? I don't want you to read this. I just want you to see this decision tree. And I'm sure many of you who are in this situation, you already do this, right? Like, this is our kind of mental math on the daily. When you're working out, it looks kind of 10 times more complex, because you have to think about your starting blood sugar or your child's starting blood sugar. You have to think about when you're actually doing the activity, how the activity will influence, what happens after the fact as well. So what I try and, share in terms of simplification is to kind of break it down into 3 buckets. I think of the types of exercise that you're doing, the timing of the workout, and your individual trends. So I'll go into each one kind of one at a time, and then we'll jump into more specifically types of exercise in the next few slides, because I think that's really where there's a lot of kind of good info. It's really kind of the meat and potatoes when it comes to developing a strategy for exercise. So when you think about types of exercise, I want you to think about the activities that you do or that your children do, and think about, what does it look like? Are they really using their heart and their lungs? Are they, running and huffing and puffing? Are they doing more high intensity but short duration work, right? Maybe they are track and field athletes where they sprint and then they stop, right? Or they do a high jump and then they stop. Or are they really doing kind of maximal effort work, or using their muscles, like in CrossFit, for example? Then I want you to think about the timing of the workout. So you might have noticed that if you work out first thing in the morning when you're fasted, you won't go low as often. And there's actually science behind that, because we know that there are a lot of hormones to wake you up, right? And those hormones actually act against insulin to keep your blood sugars a little bit higher. And so if you're someone that tends to go low when you work out, the science actually shows that a good time to work out is first thing in the morning. Another thing to keep in mind is, the insulin on board, right? So the IOB, if you're on an insulin pump, you often have that number available to you. And that just means how much insulin is still active in your system that may cause you to go low while you work out. So something to keep in mind. Another thing I think in terms of timing that we often forget about, or that we learn with practice or with experience, is this idea of training versus racing, or a practice versus a game, right? So you may have noticed, as an example, let's say you have I don't know, a 12-year-old son who plays soccer, and for a casual practice with friends, his blood sugar might go down or stay relatively steady. It's a bit of a stop and go activity, right? So you'll see in the next few slides that usually in those stop and go activities, blood sugar can stay fairly steady. Versus a game, if he's playing a high stress game with, a really important opponent, he might have so much adrenaline in his system that even if you give him insulin, he stays quite high, right? So thinking about the differences that might happen between a practice versus a game, or training versus racing. Let's say if you're a runner, that race day will actually need different insulin strategies compared to your casual Sunday long run. And then lastly, I mentioned here trends, because as nice as it would be that, all of these patterns that I'm going to be sharing with you and all of this science would be consistent between all of us, we unfortunately know that people will have different ways of, having their blood sugars react to their activities. And so it's very important to keep track of individual trends. You can do it. I'm pretty old school. I like writing things down, in a notepad. If you're someone that likes apps, you can use an app to kind of track your individual trends as well. But I definitely recommend that that's something that you think about doing, because none of us can remember what happened last week or yesterday. Okay, so now let's move on to BG considerations. I think it's super important for you to know how your specific exercise or sport will affect your blood sugar. I think generally speaking, we have this idea that exercise will lower your blood sugar. And that's kind of the umbrella that we hear from, clinics and kind of in the general media. And of course, there's truth to that, but it's far more complex, right? And I want you to be comfortable knowing what happens not only during the session and during the exercise, but also what happens after the fact. Here I'm sharing a picture of a friend of mine. I don't know if you know him. His name is Sebastian Sasseville. He's from Quebec, and he's quite the athlete. He lives with type 1. He has been for about 20 years, and he's climbed Everest. He's ran across Canada, and yesterday he started the race across America, and he's going to bike across the US, I believe, in 10 days. So doing something like 400 kilometers a day. You can follow him. He's on social media at Seb Inspires. It's crazy. He's crazy. But you can definitely see that you can figure out strategies. You don't have to aim for that. You don't have to aim for biking across the US, but start where you are. Okay, let's move on to types of exercise. So this is really important. So we know that aerobic, anaerobic, and mixed exercise will actually cause your blood sugars to do different things. And you may have noticed this already, right, in your day-to-day. So with aerobic exercise, here we're talking about lower intensity, longer duration work, anything like walking or running. We'll expect a drop in blood glucose, not only during the activity, but also after the activity. With anaerobic work, here we're talking about things that are higher intensity, so a little bit harder to do. So often they're shorter duration, right? We're not able to do it for that long. And here it's work and it's stress on the body, which causes your blood sugar to go up, both during and sometimes even after the fact. The last grouping is this idea of mixed exercise. And here, unfortunately, there's no really rhyme or reason as to what our blood sugars will do, but you can expect them to either go up or go down depending on the activity. Now, I have two other graphs that kind of show this because I think it's worthwhile to spend a few minutes here. If we look at the different examples of activity, so this is work out of the Riddle Lab at York University in Toronto. They do some great work when it comes to exercise and type 1 diabetes. We can see that, we have swimming, cycling, rowing, all of these like cardiovascular exercises, right, fall under the aerobic column. And we see on the bottom, in terms of glucose trends, like I mentioned, your blood sugar will most likely go down both during the activity and following the activity. We also know that in this case, your blood sugar actually can go down up to 24 hours after the activity. And so guidelines actually say that for the overnight period, you should lower your basal if you're on a pump. If you're taking multiple injections and you're doing a very aerobic activity, you most likely need to lower your basal either before the activity or the one that you take in the evening as well. In the mixed column, we have things like I said, the stop and go activities, right? So football, basketball, hockey, gymnastics. Because you have a mixture of both aerobic and anaerobic activity, our blood sugars can actually go up or down, which is helpful in a way because at least you know that you're not going to have as high a risk of going low. With the anaerobic work, so in this last column here on the right, we're talking about the really kind of short, sharp bursts of activity where you're working really hard, but for a very short duration of time. So maybe, between 10 and 30 seconds. It could be a sprint, it could be circuits, it could be sprint to swimming, as well as martial arts. And here, the risk of blood sugars going up is happening not only during the activity, but also after the activity. And so if you know this, what you might do differently is that if you are, a little bit low before this activity, let's say you're sitting at 3.8 or 4 millimoles, you might not actually eat anything. So you might say, you know what, the last few times that I did this anaerobic activity, I went a little bit higher during and after the activity. So I'm okay starting at 3.8 or 4, right? Versus if you're doing an aerobic activity like swimming, most of you will probably know, but if you start at 3.8 or 4, you will probably go low quite quickly without any changes to your food or to your insulin. So you might want to lower your insulin in that case or eat something, right, before you start. This is one more visual that I quite like. This is from a study that we fund out of Quebec as well. It's called the Better Study. And here what we're looking at work. So in the pink.
For a sec. Oh, do you want to just start that again? Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. For this slide?
Yeah.
Sure. So the slide here is from a study funded by us in Quebec. It's called the Better Study. You can learn more about them at type1better.com. And I just want to touch on here the graphs because I think they're quite helpful. If we look at the cardiovascular column, so on the left in pink, we see how the blood sugar goes down over time, right? So there's a high risk of hypoglycemia. For the interval work, so in purple, we see that the blood sugars can actually be quite stable during the activity, but you might still go low afterwards. For resistance, what we see in the kind of, I guess, the third column in blue is that with this work, you're really at a higher intensity, right? So you'll see a slight risk of hyperglycemia. So your blood sugar might go up during the activity, but then it'll still probably go low after the fact. And then in the last column in blue on the right is, again, this idea of maximum effort, like I was saying, with the kind of 10 to 30 second hard intervals. Here, what we see is that you actually have a risk of going high both during and after the activity. Another way to think about it is if you're really not sure kind of where your activity falls, is taking a look at either your heart rate or at your RPE, which is your rate of perceived exertion. It sounds all scientific, but really what it means is if you had to, put down on a scale between 1 and 10, your effort level, with 1 being, sitting on the couch and 10 being a full out sprint, where would you fall? And somewhere along the 7 out of 10 mark is where we see this switch between aerobic and anaerobic, which means that if you're working harder than a 7 out of 10, you're most likely in that maximum effort, and you're most likely to see more high blood sugars than low blood sugars. Now, when it comes to insulin considerations, this again is work out of the Riddle Lab at York University. I just want to touch on a few things here. So in the first kind of chunk of text on the top, we're talking about when you have a risk of going low. So they've called it hyperinsulinemia, which just means when you have more insulin. When you work out, your insulin is more sensitive, like I said, and you do have a risk of going low. So what can you do in those cases, right? So if you're on a pump, they recommend lowering your basal rate by between 50 to 80% at least 90 minutes before exercise, because we know that it takes at least an hour or so before that new setting will kick in. You can also suspend your pump, which means switch it off, right? So no insulin is coming in right when you start your exercise. The benefit with a suspension is if you're doing something spontaneous, if you hadn't planned for the activity and you don't want to go low, but it isn't really as effective as a temporary decrease in your basal rate. If you're using MDI, which is multiple daily injections, so if you're on injections, you have also a few options. You can lower your basal, let's say in the morning before an activity, or even the night before, depending on your plans for the day. Or you can eat more, right? Eating more often is easier said than done. A lot of people have trouble getting in enough food during exercise, but it is one strategy that works for some people. In the bottom chunk of text, we're talking about when you have, less insulin, or when you're at risk of going high after intense exercise. What can you do, right? So you can either increase your basal rate. So here we have a temporary increase in your basal, and that could be something as simple as, a 20 to 30% increase after a high intensity workout for maybe 2 to 3 hours after your workout. Keeping in mind that you still might go low overnight when you're replenishing your glycogen stores, for example. And then if you're on injections, a few things to keep in mind that can help you lower your blood sugars after an intensive exercise is keeping really well hydrated, right? We know that if we're well hydrated, if we take in a lot of water, that helps keep our blood sugars more steady or lower them faster. We also know that aerobic work makes us go lower, right? So we can incorporate more of a warm-up, an aerobic warm-up, to keep our blood sugars steady. And then the last piece here I think is really interesting, and not something we really talk about too much, but it's this idea of managing stress, right? So like I said, a race day or a game day might have high stress, which might cause your blood sugars to go up. And so if you can either yourself or your child figure out ways to manage that stress, to bring it down, then you're less likely to have those high blood sugars. Okay, now the last consideration is nutrition. And here I've marked down a couple of questions that I think are important to think about, right? So how does food impact your blood sugars before, during, and of course after exercise? How do you treat low blood sugars during exercise? Often what we see is people actually treat low blood sugars the same way during exercise as they would on a normal day, which might not work as well, right? If we are more insulin sensitive, and we actually tend to go quite low quite quickly during exercise, we might need more than, let's say you take the recommended 15 grams of carbohydrates to treat a low, you might actually need more than that, because your body and your muscles, while you're exercising, are pulling in all the sugar already, right? Just noticed a little typo there. How does food impact your performance? And that's another piece that I think is really crucial. You want to make sure that even if your blood sugar is high during an activity, you're still taking in the nutrition that you need for your performance. And that might mean taking in insulin as well, right? Additional insulin for that food. And then I'll touch a little bit on recovery foods, what you should eat after a workout. The one line here that I have in bold is something that I heard years and years ago when I was training more intensely, and it was this idea that, yes, you might have type 1 diabetes, but you're also an active individual, you're also an athlete, and so you don't want to forget that. So you want to make sure that you're treating the athlete, then the diabetes. Of course, if you have a very low blood sugar, you want to stop and treat the low blood sugar. If you have a very high blood sugar, if you have ketones, you want to stop and make sure you're well. But overall, you want to make sure that you're treating the athlete, you're taking in the liquids, the water, the salt, and the food that you need in order to complete your activity. The last point is about training fasted. We've kind of touched on that beforehand in terms of not going low as often in the morning. But the other benefit is if you're not going to be going low in the morning, you don't have to eat as much either, right? First thing in the morning. And so if you're someone who might get an upset stomach, or if you're someone who's looking perhaps to lose weight, you don't necessarily want to be forced to eat all this carbohydrate during a workout, for instance. This is kind of already what I've touched on, but what I want to focus on is just the amount of carbohydrates that's needed. And so if you look at what's bolded in kind of the center of the slide, we see that for activities that are under an hour, if you have your kind of normal basal rates, you don't really need that much for an hour activity, and you might already know this from your own experience, but about 8 to 20 grams of carbohydrates should be enough, right? So that might be a juice, that might be a banana, for instance. If you have higher circulating insulin levels, though, so that might mean that you're exercising, let's say, shortly after lunch, and so you still have your insulin on board. Other than lowering your basal rate, you probably will also need about 30 to 60 grams per hour of carbohydrate. And, like if you think back to one of your recent workouts and you think, did I even take in any carbohydrate? Excuse me. Oftentimes, people aren't really eating that much, right? They might take in 10 grams or 20 grams for an hour-long activity. And so what I'd like you to do is think about what you are taking in, and then again, be realistic with your change. I don't want you going from 10 grams to 60 grams from one day to another, because that won't be sustainable for you, right? So kind of figure out what your starting point is. Know that this is kind of the goal. The goal is about 20 grams every 20 minutes to help you with your performance and for your fitness. And then for activities that are longer, so activities that are longer than an hour, the recommendation is, of course, either to take in carbohydrate or decrease your insulin. And this will really depend on your own fitness levels and the activities that you're doing. But the recommendation here is approximately 0.4 to 1.3 grams per kilo of body mass per hour. If you kind of take the average, if you look at about 1 gram per kilogram of body mass per hour, it's a little bit easier to think about. So if you weigh 60 kilo, you should aim for 60 grams per hour. 1 second, I'm just gonna get some water. Okay. And then when it comes to hydration, I think most people are fairly good at drinking enough while they work out, but you want to aim for about 1 liter every hour. You don't really need to worry about taking in salts or electrolytes for anything under an hour. But if you're, a heavy sweater, if you're out in the heat, then definitely consider some salt replacement as well. Okay, last point is this idea of recovery meals, right? And some of you might be doing this already, some of you may not. The idea here is to make sure that you're allowing your body to recover after the work that it's just completed, right? The goal is to restore the glycogen, so making sure that you're storing sugar so that it's accessible for later. And you're also wanting to make sure that your muscles can recover. So generally speaking, what the guidelines suggest is to have either a snack or a meal after a longer workout. You don't have to, have a recovery shake after a 20 or 30-minute walk. This is more for a substantial amount of work that you're doing. To have a snack or meal at a 2-to-1 ratio of carbohydrates to protein. So again, with an example of someone who weighs 60 kilo, we'd look at about 1 gram per kilo, so about 60 grams of carbohydrate, and then about 30 grams of protein. And you can do this in different ways. A lot of people do, smoothies or shakes because it's easier to get in the protein. But you could also just have a meal, right? You could have a chicken sandwich, for example. So I know that was a lot of information. I tried my best in 30 minutes to share what I thought would be most beneficial for all of you as you're planning out strategies for yourself or for your family. I want you to kind of take this information, maybe rewatch it, think about a recent workout or activity that you've completed. Think about the type, the timing, and the trends, your individual trends. Think about the food, right? Like I said, oftentimes people are not eating enough food for the work that they're doing because they're worried about either a low blood sugar that would come on with the insulin that would be needed, or worried about eating while you have a high blood sugar, even though you're working out. I want you to think about your greatest challenge. If you feel comfortable sharing tonight, definitely, you know, that would be great if you want to ask about your challenges and we can kind of tackle them together. And then I want you to think about what will you try next time. I think the big thing with type 1 diabetes and exercise is knowing that it takes time, it takes patience, and it takes practice, right, to figure out what is the best strategy for you. Do you need more or less food? Do you need to change your insulin? Do you need to try working out at a different time of day, or maybe even eating different foods, right? Often we get a little bit picky about what we eat while we work out because our stomach just doesn't accept what we're eating, right? Or drinking for that matter. So lastly, before we jump into questions, just a few ideas if you want to get involved in physical activities and events with us. We just had our walk, which took place last weekend, which was really successful. If any of you were there, thank you for being involved. The second thing is if you're a runner or you are an aspiring runner, you can join the team out of the international office in New York, the jrf.org. They have a team right now preparing for the New York City Marathon. It is a fantastic marathon. I did it about 10 years ago, and it's really quite something special. We also have the ride. The ride is happening in the fall, in October, and you can register your teams. It's more of a corporate event, but it's a really, really fun one. We have a few in-person locations, one of which is in Toronto, and you can register for that in June. If you want to go down to the US, they have a really great program called JRF Ride to Cure Diabetes. You may have heard of it. They have events throughout the US throughout the summer that you can sign up for. And then lastly, I just have here on the left, if you're into golf, we also have some activities around golf in the fall as well. So that's everything from me. And as Ruth knows, I can talk about this for hours, so I will stop there. I will stop sharing my slide. There's my email. If you have any questions after the fact or you're not comfortable asking them tonight, please do shoot me an email. I'm always happy to receive them and answer them for you. So let me stop sharing.
Some questions in the chat. I'm just going to scroll back and start.
Yeah, for sure.
From the beginning. Jasmine had a question about superstarches. She's found that the UCAN bars were amazing for keeping blood sugar stable, but they're expensive. So someone responded, Bernard, that he uses Nature Valley Sweet and Salty, which is approximately 21 to 25. But are there other similar products that are similarly priced to the Nature Valley type price range?
Yeah, so it's funny. Sports nutrition has become such a huge kind of marketing product, right? I've heard great things about UCAN. I've never tried it myself, but I have heard that it's quite good for stabilizing blood sugars. But you definitely, yes, like Alex says, a slice of bread and honey, you definitely can go basic, right? Like I remember my first marathon, I ate Snicker bars because I'm like, I need sugar, I need fat, and I need protein. And at the time they were selling these really tiny size ones. I think they were probably like Halloween sized ones that I could keep in my pocket. So you don't necessarily need to go down the sports nutrition route, which tend to be more expensive. A store like Mech or a camping store often has a good variety of bars, protein bars, etc. You know, some that are vegan or vegetarian if that's what you want to find. But they can be pricey. Anytime something's kind of wrapped up and packaged nicely, it will be pricey. But for sure, you can do. I mean, I had friends who would do, you know, who were training for Ironman with a baked potato in their back pocket, like. So, you know, you can do that, right? Some people make these little rice cakes, right? Where they have kind of like a sushi type rice where they add sugar and water to it to really get those carbs. And they put like a simple layer of, you know, peanut butter and jelly in between. So you can be pretty resourceful and creative. But I agree, there are definitely, you know, many bars out there that are quite expensive. Good pint of Guinness, yeah. Why not? Why use protein bars to address? So the idea of protein bars is, so it's a few fold. So when you think of nutrition and when you think of treating a low blood sugar, I think we're often told you want something that's fast acting, right? So you want a quick sugar to get that blood sugar up. The challenge with doing that while you're working out and while you're moving is that you're so insulin sensitive, you're pulling in that sugar so quickly, and you're putting your body through this work that is causing you to go low. You need something on top of a simple sugar. So you need either a fat or a protein to kind of sustain, give you the energy and not make you drop down right away. So often we say a bit of protein, a bit of fat, nothing too heavy. If you try something like a Cliff Bar, if you're familiar with a Cliff Bar, they're quite heavy. They have quite a lot of fat and quite a lot of protein, depending on the type, which might actually mean that it won't do much until it starts getting digested. And then when it starts getting digested, your blood sugar will shoot up. So I would say try out different things. If you're doing something for longer than an hour or 2 hours, look into incorporating some sort of protein and fat, but it can be something simple like peanut butter, like honey.
I can see that the hand is up in the chat on some people. Unfortunately, we've got so many people in here, I can't see whose hand it is. So if you either want to put it in the chat or unmute yourself, and you can ask the question. I'm going to try. So I can see Alex and Bernard. You had a few questions in here. Did you want to just unmute yourselves and you can ask them rather than me going back and asking them, just possibly some of them have been addressed?
This is Bernard, unmuting myself. My last question was the protein bar. I mean, I have only just bought protein bars. I'm not quite sure how to use them. I've hardly used them. I'm struggling. That's an earlier comment I made. I'm struggling with what I call the lead and the lag times when I use carbohydrates and I exercise. Having them match the curve is a problem that I struggle with. Let's say I struggle with it because these days we have these wonderful continuous glucose meters, which they didn't have when I was diagnosed 47 years ago. But now I'm trying to keep my curve somewhat flat, and that's a challenge.
Yeah, of course. And that's, it's a great question. I think the more information we can gather from these technologies like the CGM, it's in a way, it's a wonderful tool. I have one too, and I wouldn't live without one now, but it also gives us that additional challenge of figuring out, okay, like how tight does that line have to be? If I'm working out, how much do I want to make sure that I'm within my target range? Treating a low or treating a high blood sugar while you're working out also can be challenging because it takes time for the food to digest, right? When we think about when we work out, our blood isn't really in our stomach, right? Our blood has other things to do and it's not really digesting food, which is why a lot of times we say to take a simpler sugar, to take something like, a gel or honey or even maple syrup, right? You can take maple syrup from the house just to get a quick, easy digestible sugar. But if you tend to go low often, incorporating that protein bar will give you a little bit more sustenance, right? It'll give you a little bit more food to digest, but it will take longer to digest. So unfortunately, I wish I had a better answer for you, Bernard, than it's trial and error for your individual case and your individual activity. I would say use the CGM data to help guide you, but don't get stuck to it. Occasionally I would get frustrated with the CGM and I would say, I'm going to go for my bike ride today and trust my intuition. Like I've also had, T1D for over 30 years. I've only lived with the CGM for maybe 5 or 6. And I kind of know my body, right? And so sometimes it's okay to do that as well. I don't know if that's helpful.
Thank you. I hope to use the CGM for the next 20 years. That's
Good.
Not what my doctors promised me 47 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's crazy how far things have come.
So Michelle asks, can you explain why someone training hard for a triathlon might suddenly start getting consistent hypos all day when her settings and carb intake have not changed?
Yeah, of course. So that's something that a lot of endurance athletes, sorry, that was Michelle who asked. Just I'm making sure
Yes.
Okay, Michelle. So if you've been working out for a long time, if you're an endurance athlete, part of the challenge is that you might not, as much as you might be eating well during your workouts, maybe you're already taking in your recovery meals, you're getting in your carbs and your protein after the fact. What we see often, and there's literature around this, is that people don't eat enough during the week, and so their glycogen stores are actually quite low. And we also know that the more you go low, the higher risk of going low again. And so some guidelines actually say if you've had a severe low one day, like let's say today, what are we, Wednesday? If I had a severe low today, I most likely should not do a hard workout tomorrow because I have a higher risk of going low. So what I would suggest for you is to take a look at your week, take a look at not only what you're eating during the workout, making sure you're eating enough. You can go back and look at those recommendations that I've shared, but think about your week in its entirety. And are you eating enough for someone who's as active as you are? A lot of people fall into this, belief of eating healthy. And so they might do a really hard workout or on Saturday and Sunday, and then on Monday they'll have a salad and a fish portion. But they're not eating for the activity that they're doing. So that's most likely, I would say, the first step in trying to figure out why you're going low so often.
Okay, Sophie and Victoria, so you both have your hands up. Sophie, do you want to just ask your question, and then Victoria, and then Mike, we'll get to yours in the chat.
Actually, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you. I've been diabetic for nearly 41 years, and I keep learning new things all the time about diabetes and its management. And I'm very active, always have been. And tonight I've learned very important things that I couldn't explain by myself, like the heavy workout and then your sugar spikes. I couldn't understand why it would happen like that. So I just wanted to say a big thank you to all of you. And it's nice to be with people that get what it's like to live with type 1 diabetes every day. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, of course. You're welcome, Sophie. I think also part of that is, for any of us who were diagnosed a while ago, one, the general belief was exercise makes you go low. And that was kind of drilled into us, right? So I think because of that, the idea, like, for a strength workout, the idea to like maybe have to give insulin before a workout seems not only foreign, but scary, right?
Yeah.
But then what happens is you'll find that, I mean, one, that like the science and the literature is showing us this, but your own personal experience will show you that, oh my goodness, I'm going high every time I do this workout. Then, okay, maybe I should not be lowering my basal and eating a sandwich. Maybe I should be giving insulin, right? And so I think with practice, we build that confidence. And then knowing that there's science behind it, you're like, okay, it's not just me. This is actually what does happen, right? So.
And I think your point about personal trends is very important because we're all different and we all react to things differently. And I think it's important to get to know what is us in terms of management. So thank you for saying that too.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Victoria, did you want to unmute yourself and ask your question if you're still here?
I am still here and listening intently. So I, like Sophie and Bernard, and I think probably a lot of people on this call. So I guess I've lived with type 1 diabetes for 53 years. I was diagnosed at 9 months of age by a really talented pediatrician.
Wow.
My daughter, a year and a half ago, was also diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. She's now just turned 20. She is an elite athlete. She's in school over in London, England. Will be coming home next week, thank God. So two quick questions. So she also uses Snickers.
Does she?
So I the fun size. Yeah.
Yes.
I have taken a lot of screenshots because it's 3 o'clock in England right now, so AM. so I told her I would attend. I have learned so much
of
what I thought I knew. My one question I have I work in healthcare in an administrative, an executive role with pandemic, working 70 and 80-hour weeks on Zoom calls, and have packed on the 10 to 15 COVID pounds. Not why I'm off camera. In terms of exercise, I'm really trying the 150 a week. Are there any pointers in types of exercise that can help with a bit of, not so much weight loss, but just more muscle conversion, right?
Yeah, of course. I didn't really touch on weight loss strategies for T1D. I think they are definitely valuable. I just didn't have enough time, unfortunately. But a few things to consider. One is, like I said, we know that exercise makes you more sensitive to insulin, right? So one strategy that you can use and has been shown to be helpful in T1Ds is to time out, kind of stack your workout with a meal, right? So make that recovery meal your actual meal. So you could do your workout, make yourself more insulin sensitive, and then have breakfast right after, because you'll need less insulin for that meal. Same can be said for lunch or dinner, right? So if you do your workout right before lunch, keeping in mind that these are workouts that are probably lower intensity, right? More of an aerobic workout. Walking is fantastic. I think we all know that when you go for a walk, you always need to bring some juice or something with you. So if you can stack a walk with a meal, then you'll need less insulin for that meal. There's a bit of a misconception that the more insulin you take, the more fat you store, which really isn't the case, because you can have people who are quite sensitive to insulin and eat a ton of carbs. They're plant-based diets, they eat a ton of carbs all throughout the day, and they don't gain weight. I think it's really this idea of sensitivity and resistance. And so if you can make your body more sensitive, so working out more, building your muscles, I would say incorporating resistance work. If you can do anything like body weight exercises to yoga, just kind of incorporate resistance work to build your muscle, then you'll be more insulin sensitive as well. And so that will help you lean out. And then the timing, the resistance work. And then the last thing is looking at, if you're on a pump, I don't know if you're on a pump, Victoria, or on a pen, looking at how much insulin you take for your basal versus your bolus. And looking at, are you taking in a lot more insulin for your meals than you are for your background? Ideally, you want it to be around 50-50. So that's something to look at, because that can help you with insulin sensitivity again, right? The idea that you're not taking too much insulin throughout the day. Of course, looking at what you're taking in, you want high quality, high nutrient foods. Yeah. Generally, we say mostly plants. Everything else can be pretty balanced, a little bit of everything, but that's kind of the recommendation from the sports nutrition side. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think I'll look at that, the basal bolus. I think that might definitely help me, and I think just more movement. Honest to God, these Zoom calls.
Yeah, movement is great, and like don't underestimate a walk, right? Don't underestimate kind of that low intensity. That's really great for insulin sensitivity. There's a great blog. I don't have the link right now, but it's on. I don't know if Katie maybe wants to look for it, or Ruth, on Beyond Type 1 that Cliff Scherb, SCHERB, wrote. He's a triathlon coach and a T1D in the US, and he wrote a great piece for Beyond Type 1, an organization in the US, about trying to lose weight or maintaining your weight as a T1D. So if we have that, we'll share it. If not, I would just recommend Googling it.
Right. And I'm going to walk to work and then eat breakfast.
Yeah.
Read Mike McPhee's question. So he had a question about where you actually give insulin and if that can affect your blood glucose levels. So if he's running and on a pump and the insulin is going into the upper thigh, could this affect the uptake? Because it's like where the muscle's actually working where you're running. And also, is there a latent effect of insulin in your body? So if it's delivered into your legs and going for a run, is there a chance that it's not been used up and is liberated with exercise?
So the first question is yes. If you are giving your insulin, because insulin needs blood to move around, right, and get to where it needs to act. And so if you're working out, if you're giving insulin in muscles that are exercising, like your thighs, if you're running, then yes, you will notice a faster kind of uptake. On top of it, you are more sensitive, right, to insulin while you're working out. And so those two things combined mean that you either need to think about the timing of when you're giving insulin, or the dosage, right? So let's say you have a carb ratio on a normal day. If you're super active or if you're working out, you could probably either half or, give 75% of that carb ratio while you're moving. The second question about the latency, not so much. If anything, it'll act faster because you're moving, right? It won't kick in later. What kicks in later is the digestion of heavier foods. And so if you're a cyclist, if you're sitting on your bike and your blood rather is in your legs, there's not as much in the stomach. And so what you might see after going for a bike ride, or if you're a triathlete, what you might see when you get off the bike is all of a sudden your blood sugar shoots up. Part of that is because you've stopped moving, but part of it might be that all of a sudden the blood is like, oh, hey, look, there's food in the stomach. I'm going to digest it now, right? So it might be one of the two things that happens. Victoria, I also see my colleague Katie put the link for the blog that I mentioned in the chat. Thanks, Katie.
Anne asks, can high levels of exercise in the evening cause elevated ketones in the morning?
High levels of exercise, it could. Yeah, it definitely could. I mean, I think with ketones, it depends on the workout that you're doing. It depends on your diet as well. Generally speaking, we say not to, like the guidelines say not to partake in activity if you have high ketone levels. But it really kind of, it's hard for me to say. It really depends on kind of case by case situation.
And do you mind, Anne, if we just maybe go like 5 minutes over just to get in everybody's questions?
Yeah, for sure.
Bryna, do you
Happy to
want
stay
to
on.
unmute yourself and ask your question? Okay, are you still here, Bryna? I see you're muted. Or I'll unmute you. Here, I'll do it. I'll try to do it.
Or you could put it in the chat as well.
You can put it in the chat as well,
yeah.
if you're having difficulty. Alex, is there any question you wanted to unmute yourself and ask? I also saw, and I missed it earlier, I'm sorry. Jacob, you were talking about your biggest challenge is trying to maintain a good blood sugar level during soccer matches. I think this might be for his child, but that the highs and lows affect his mental state and physicality during the games, so it doesn't allow him to work at peak performance. Probably some of that anxiety that we referred to before, and worrying about these things while you're exercising impact your ability to play.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point, right? When it comes to managing that stress and that adrenaline. And that can also be something that happens if you're new to fitness or new to exercise. The actual exercise might be a stressor for your body, right? And so that might actually cause you to go higher than someone who, let's say, has been working out for years. When it comes to matches and games, I think the big thing is to think about ways to lower your stress, coming up with strategies prior to a game, for example, that can help you or your child, and then really looking at marking down trends that occur for you or for your child. So what are they eating? Perhaps you can, change the type of carbohydrate that they eat that day. So look for lower GI foods, so lower glycemic index, which are foods that, don't spike you as quickly, right? They give you the energy, but they don't spike you as quickly. They're usually higher in fiber. So something like, a really kind of dark piece of bread will affect you not as quickly as, a more processed white piece of bread, right? Because it has more fiber. So I would say stress and nutrition and trends. But it's hard. It's definitely hard, especially with the adrenaline, especially with younger kids, because they don't yet have that life experience of mitigating stress, right? Of lowering their stress levels.
Okay, so we had I'll just read her question first because she's been trying to ask it for so long. My son is very active with daily sports. I can't seem to get the timing right on what type of carb and how long prior to sport to give it. I end up just giving OJ directly before sport. Otherwise, I'll often go low before the carb hits. What advice on the timing and type of carb prior to basketball or baseball?
Yeah, so basketball and baseball is kind of like that mixed category, right? Where you might go a little bit high, a little bit low. I would say looking at the starting point, generally speaking, we say to be under 10, between like 5 and 10 millimoles before exercise. But again, it totally varies between individuals. You want to make sure that the meal that you have prior to your workouts, whether that's the breakfast or the lunch, has a good amount of carbohydrates, but also a good amount of protein and fat, so that the sugar that comes from it doesn't just go up and down, right? That it kind of goes up and stays a little bit flatter. In terms of timing, I mean, you want to give your body enough time to digest the food. You don't want to go on and have most of the food sitting like a lump in your stomach. So I would say at least 45 minutes before. The other risk is the bolus that comes with that meal, right? If he's eating too closely, I believe it was, you said your son, if he's eating too closely to the game, then that insulin is going to be active during the game, and he's going to be even more sensitive to that insulin during the game. So he might be going low because of that. So ideally, if you can put the meal, a good 2 hours before, but I know that's not always possible depending on the schedule, then that could be helpful because you won't have as much circulating insulin during the game.
Okay, and then we have a question from Tana. Do you have any data showing the benefits of training in an altitude chamber? Blood glucose is, for whatever reason, incredibly stable during and after chamber training. I acknowledge I don't know what that is, but
you know what? I don't have any data on me. I know that there is research around that, and it's quite interesting with like high altitude climbers. I can get back to you if you want to share your email with us. I can definitely find that because I've read it. I just don't have it handy right now. But if you think about it, it makes sense because it's the physics of it affect our circulation in our body, and so it affects the way that insulin works and that food is getting digested. But yeah, if you want to either email me or send a note with your email, I can definitely reach out. I think there were a few other questions. I saw just one quick one on the glycemic index that Bernard had put in after I was talking about glycemic index. And, it's the question of how do you know what the GI or the glycemic index is of certain foods. Generally speaking, foods that are packaged, that are lower in fiber, will be higher GI, and then more kind of natural foods of the earth, right? Things that are grown in the ground will be lower GI. But your best bet is to Google it. And there are so many tables, Bernard, with food kind of marked out with the GI. And you'll get a sense quickly just by looking at that list, because it kind of makes sense. Like orange juice will be a high GI. You can think about it as if you were really low, you would want a high GI product or food. And if you were just looking for kind of a nice, steady amount of sugar throughout the day, you could pick the rice or the quinoa, maybe not the rice is a little bit higher, but maybe like the quinoa, which is a higher protein grain.
So I want to get Angela's question in because she's 9 years old and it's 9 p.m. possibly where she is.
Yes.
She wants to know how to treat her lows better during gym class. And I saw that Bernard recommended Dex 4. I know they're coming out with new flavors for back to school. I only know that because we're going to be doing a blog on it soon, but there are probably other options as well.
Yeah, there are so many, and I'm sure everyone here could give you some of their favorites in the chat, but juice boxes are one. The Dex 4s are great. They're little kind of capsules with really yummy flavors like grape and watermelon. I think they still make watermelon. You can do candies, right? You can do Skittles, anything that is kind of sugar-based. If you like foods that are a little bit more, let's say, on the kind of bread waffle side, right? You can do things like that. You can make yourself little sandwiches at home and bring that. I mean, there's so many, right? There's so many options. But if you're low and you want sugar, Welch's fruit snack, those are great. And I don't know if your parents go to Costco, but they have these little packages of Welch's fruit snacks that are, I believe, I think someone just mentioned, I think it's 15 grams or so. And those are nice because you can just open it up and you can eat the whole package. But yeah, lots of options.
Okay, did we have any other questions? I put Anne's email in the chat. We're also going to be sending out an email tomorrow that has links to some other presentations. And are we able to send the slide deck to people if they want it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, Bernard, did you see Anne's email in the chat?
Should be there. It's very simple. It's amacdonald@jrf.ca.
And if you want to just send her an email, we can send the slide deck. Victoria, if you want that for your daughter in England, then we can send that over too. This is also being recorded, so she can also watch the whole thing if she's so inclined. I don't know how much a 20-year-old university student wants to watch this on YouTube for an hour, but it will be up tomorrow. Yeah, so the link, Melissa,
she'll be embarrassed about Mom's question, I'm sure.
Posting it to YouTube, and we're going to email it to everyone who was on the call tonight as well, in addition to some links. And then you can also email Anne if you want an actual copy of the PowerPoint presentation. So we'll make sure everybody gets it.
Yeah, we can definitely.
Like,
I can PDF it and share it with everyone.
Yeah. It's good to know that we've got a lot of questions that came out of this, and maybe we can do another session on exercise and technology. And there's definitely, we can see a lot of interest in this, so we'll hold another one. And never fear, everyone here tonight will get the link tomorrow. And you can also email Anne if you'd like, just the actual presentation itself. And I think we'll wrap it up if that's okay for everybody. And I wanted to tell Angela it's probably bedtime, so we should wrap it up. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming and for your participation and for sharing. The chat was really active, and we love to see that. And we'll make sure to get everything out to you tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the information.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.